started here. Hello, this is Erin Aquino Carhart. I'm with the Watershed Restoration Grants branch of the Department of Fish and Wildlife. And if you're here for the Wetlands Restoration for Greenhouse Gas Reduction Proposal Solicitation Notice Pre-Application Workshop, you are in the right place. So I'm just going to dive in. We're going to keep everyone muted just to keep things efficient. We're going to have the Q&A section at the end. Here is the agenda of this workshop. So we're going to go over the PSN process. So for this proposal solicitation notice, or PSN, we have the whole overview of what you can expect for the entire process. And then we'll talk about our web grant system, which is how you will apply. And we'll walk through the actual pre-application on web grants, and then give you some tips and tricks, what not to do's and what you should pay attention to when it comes to writing your proposals. And in this case, the pre-application. And then, as I said, the Q&A session will be at the end. So this is our PSN process for this cycle. It starts with a pre-application phase, which is new from our previous years. In this phase, you'll go through a more simplified process to give us summary information and enter that into the web grant system, which it'll go through our standard administrative review and then get technical comments from our internal staff. And we'll provide technical comments so that we can give you advice on how to best develop your final application. So we're not going to have a formalized consultation. It will just be comments that we would like you to address when you're providing and developing and providing your final application. So if you're engaging in this process, you will need to apply through the pre-application phase first, and then meet our criteria to be invited into the final application phase. So again, unless you enter through pre-application, you cannot go on to final application. Final application phase will be the rest of the information. It will be a lot more detailed as to what your project entails, what the scope of work is, exactly what your schedule will be, the details of your budget. What kind of deliverables do you expect? What kind of monitoring? It also goes through web grants. And so once you're invited from the pre-application phase into final, you'll receive an automatic email, and we'll also send you an email from a human discussing or providing you the different comments that you received from your pre-application phase. And in this phase is when we'll take a look at any engineering designs that you may have provided, and also go into a technical review with external reviewers from through UC Davis. Our approval process is much like past years, where the technical review scores, the engineering review scores are then provided to a selection panel, which is made up of a CDFW management from our regions and our headquarters. And then they make recommendations for the different projects to approve and submit that to our director. And the director reviews and then has final approval of our awards. And then we provide letters when successful applicants are then awarded. And today we're specifically going over the web grant system and how to apply for pre-applications. So for those of you who don't have any experience with web grants, it is an online application and tracking system that CDFW owns. And this is a system that we have been using for, I believe, a year now. And its intent is to be a one-stop grant website. So it goes through all stages from pre-application through grant award and grant tracking of a grant project. So in the past, we would have separate systems for accepting applications and proposals, and then a different database to track our grants and track their progress. This has everything all together. This is our website. The link takes us directly to Web Grants. We also provide links to the Web Grants website through the PSN and also our website. Just noting for system compatibility, it's compatible with all of the most current browsers. And if you should have any issues whatsoever, you can always email us and let us know if there's a problem. For Web Grants specific things, we have a help desk. So I will get you the contact information in a later slide. In order to apply, you need to have an account with our Web Grant system. And if you have applied to any of our other programs and used Web Grants before, you don't have to register again. You just have to use the same login and password that you have in the past. But for those who are new, to register, you go to our Web Grants website and click on this button that says Register Here. And you'll see this form pop up. And all of the fields with red asterisks are required. And something that we ask of you is that you include the organization that you're a part of, because that's definitely tied to how we determine whether or not you're an eligible applicant. And again, so if you are affiliated with more than one organization, then you need to make sure that you're applying for the correct organization when you're submitting your pre-application. And if you need to be affiliated with multiple organizations, you can just send us an email. I'm one of the Web Grants administrators through our help desk information, and we can do that for you. So the people who are submitting their pre-applications on behalf of the applicant, you need to be affiliated with your applicant organization in order to provide the correct information and in order to be tied to the other people in that organization. And that comes into play when you're adding people to your application so that multiple people can log in and edit and contribute to the same applications. Once you register, you need to remember that these the registration requests are approved by a human, and so it will take some time before you receive confirmation that your registration has been approved. It's not automatic, so please give us at least 24 hours before giving us a call or shooting us an email to see what happened to your registration. But definitely you need to wait for your registration to be approved before you can log in and start your application. You'll receive 3 different confirmation emails. The first one to confirm that, yes, we received your registration request. And then the second will let you know whether or not you were approved for your registration. And if you were approved, it will provide you your username in that second email, and the third email will provide you an automatically generated password, which then you'll change after you log in. And as I said, we have a Web Grants help desk. This is the phone number and email inbox. We answer the phones and emails from Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. And if you have any Web Grant specific questions, this is what this is for. Anything when it comes to the PSN or whether or not something fits, that's or the guidelines, that's more of a question that goes to our wetland restoration at wildlife.ca.gov email inbox. That's for the entire program. This one's specific to Web Grants. So to start an application, you first log into Web Grants and select funding opportunities. And then you will see the lists that are available to you. And the name for this one is the 2019 Wetland Restoration for Greenhouse Gas Reduction Program. So you would click onto that title. So anything with blue text in Web Grants is a link. And you would select Start a New Application. And then enter your general information for your project. So general information is always the first form that you fill out in Web Grants. And the primary contact will always be, will automatically be the person that started the application. If you want to change this, this would need to be somebody that's also affiliated in the same organization. So they also have to have registered and be part of the same organization to see them in this dropdown. So it really, you can add additional people to this. It doesn't necessarily matter who the primary contact is at this stage. It's really just for allowing one particular person to edit this form, because not everyone can add additional people or change this information in an application team, let's call it. The project title is really important to put in. If you leave this blank, then I believe the system automatically just enters in the name of the PSN. And so we've had that happen in the past, and it gets kind of confusing because we need to be able to differentiate your projects. So please put in a title. Do keep it fairly brief. And if you are entering multiple projects, please make sure that you make it clear that they are indeed different projects and not duplicative entries. So even if it's like the same creek or watershed that we're dealing with, please just make sure that there's some sort of indication that this is like a different phase or a different portion of that project. And as far as our authorized official goes, you can just keep this as what it defaults to, which will be automatically whoever the primary contact is. This doesn't have any effect later on, and we have a form that would actually allow you to provide who would be the signatory for this project. So I wouldn't worry about this yet. And when you have filled in all your information, the Save button is at the top of the screen here. And your your general information form will look like something like this once you've added everything in. If you need to edit this after the fact, you would click this edit button at the top. And one of the reasons that you would edit this, in addition to just changing whatever you added, you can add additional grantee contacts. And that's what I had mentioned previously about being affiliated with the same organization, that it's adding additional people that will be part of the team that would contribute to one application. And so just to make sure that you're all affiliated with the organization that will be the applicant, that is the applicant, so that it's very clear to us as the reviewers who is asking for the grant. So this is the process to select additional grantee contacts. So as I showed you before, edit is at the top of the screen, and you would click that to open the fields. And then you would select the additional grantee contacts from this this box here. And everybody that populates this box will be registered users on WebGrants that are registered under the same organization that you put down under organization here. And if you need to select multiple people, then you would just hold down the control button and click all the different names. And then you would hit save at the top of the screen and save the form. So here I selected testing tester, and then you see testing tester is now one of my additional contacts. So then when you would, to view the rest of the application forms, you just hit this link, go to application forms, and then it would show you the entire application, which I will show you live now. Okay. So again, this is the WebGrants homepage. And this is my login. And so you just put in your user ID and password to log in. Go to funding opportunities, and then select, which probably would be the only thing here for you, the 2018 greenhouse gas program. And if you have an so here's the start a new application button. If you have one that's already in progress, then it will be listed up here. And so here is the one that I made for this walkthrough. And you just click on the blue text title. So the form that you already saw through the slideshow is general information. So that one's already been filled out and marked as complete, which is why there's a check mark right here. The second form is project overview. And these, so this is the form. And if you notice, there are no fields shown. And this is because you need to hit this edit button before any of the fields will be open. So after I do, you can see all of the open fields, and then you select, and just enter in your answers as appropriate to your project. And this is also where you'll let us know if you're submitting on behalf of the applicant, just to let us know if you're indeed the primary contact or if we need to contact someone else who's affiliated with the organization you're submitting for. When it comes to awards for the project, definitely like who to send our letter to if you are being awarded. And this provides basic information for your project so that we can pull this out for our data. And also it helps for selection, where in terms of where your project's located, the duration, the different counties that might be involved. This is a lot of the same information as you'll notice from the actual pre-application template. And this is just so that we have the data within the system. So after you would fill this out, you would hit save, and you can then mark it as complete once you're done, and you'll see the check mark in the next page, in the previous page. Oh, so yes, here's the mark as complete button. So once you are indeed complete, you hit this button to check it off, and it's just to have these final checks before you submit, just to make sure everything is right. It'll also warn you if there are required fields that have this asterisk that haven't been completed. Or you could always save it and complete it later. Sometimes you need a bit more time. And to return to the application forms, you can just use this button. And this is the main application page again. Pre-application attachments. This is where the pre-application template you will fill out and attach here, and then all of the different attachments that it calls for and requires in the pre-application template. Each one of these items is available here for you. So in order to attach it, you would click the name of the attachment and then upload the file by clicking this button and then putting a short description of what it is. And to make things a little simpler, we also attached or included a link to the pre-application template just in case you didn't have a copy, so you can work off of that. And like every other form, it will have a mark as complete feature. So once you've uploaded all of your attachments, you would mark this as complete, and then once all forms are marked as complete, you can submit your pre-application. I just want to go over the pre-application template. So this is Appendix A that was attached to the PSN. What we ask is that you fill in this basic information, and understandably it's the same as the project summary, project overview, but it's a different way of receiving the information for us. So it's nice to have the summary information all together and then also within our database so that we can pull it together with our review data later. When you fill in these boxes, please just remove all of the italicized text. These are instructions just for your benefit. Once you enter in the information, you can remove that. The same goes for the rest of the template. So majority of the space for this pre-application will be for your project description. We're asking you to really just describe your project, let us know the basics of it, how it fits into this PSN, what do you intend to do, and how and why, and who will be participating. but in fairly like broad terms. We need to know a summary, just the basic overview. The conceptual model is where you would provide us with a model that justifies the scientific basis of your project. So you're claiming greenhouse gas benefits and other co-benefits. You need to demonstrate to us that what you're doing, there's a scientific basis for that, and that's all we're asking for a conceptual model. It doesn't have to be something overly complicated or fancy. It just needs to speak to what you're doing and just make logical sense when it comes to justifying the project. The timeline is where you're going to show us all the different milestones in your project. This will also include when you've completed your permitting, when you'll have your engineering done. This will be all of the major points in your project where we need to see from beginning to end what you plan on doing and if you've given the appropriate amount of time for everything. If you come in with 0% engineering and we have the restriction of 1 year to complete your planning, it may not be a good fit. You may not be ready for this kind of project. It's just something that we'd like to consider because monitoring is a really essential portion of these grants, and we need to make sure that you can complete construction activities in advance to do monitoring and to start tracking possible GHG benefits and the co-benefits as well. And that's really the heart of what these grants are about. And we also like to note in multiple places, of course, that the end date cannot be later than January 1st, 2025 for CSUs or UCs, or March 15th, 2025 for all applicants. And this is directly tied to when we need to close books for our fiscal system. It is it does shorten projects a bit, but as long as you account for it in the beginning, we can accommodate you otherwise. So please just keep that in mind when you're planning out your projects and when you're describing it to us. When you're working on your GHG benefits, you must use the California Air Resources Board quantification methodology and their calculator tool. And so we have a link to where these documents are, but we also try to walk you through exactly where to find it. It's in a table, and there's under a header called Natural Resources and Waste Diversion, and you'll see California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and then here will be our links and documents. So so once you complete your calculator tool that's appropriate to the project type that your project will be, you will attach it in WebGrants, as I showed you. And if you have any additional methodologies that you're looking at, you have the option to attach those as well. You are required, however, to use the CARB or California Air Resources Board methodologies and calculator tool, though. But you can provide additional information as necessary. Land tenure is also a fairly large requirement. We asked for the most critical requirements up front for our pre-application because we need to know if a project is ready and if they can move successfully forward in a final application. Land tenure requirement is was given to us through our funding, and I have the code sections there. And we are required that these projects maintain their benefits for at least 50 years. And we have interpreted that to mean 50 years after construction activities have completed, because that's when you can start quantifying your GHG benefits, and that's also when your co-benefits can start being calculated or monitored as well. So in order to achieve this requirement, you need to provide us a letter from the landowner saying that they're willing to enter into a process with you, or they're a willing seller if that's an option. But it doesn't have to be fee title or even a conservation easement. It can be an equally enforceable conservation agreement. And depending upon who the landowner is, that can differ. So the answer to the question, what counts, is it depends. So I apologize for the vagueness of that, but it's not a clear-cut thing when you work with a lot of different landowners. So really, what's most appropriate for the project can be discussed with the landowner, and as long as they're willing to enter into an agreement of some sort for at least 50 years after construction, then you're in good standing. We ask that you describe where you are in negotiations if you don't already have an existing agreement, and the likelihood and the timing of developing said agreements. If you already have some sort of agreement with the landowner, then you're ahead of the curve. We just ask that you provide a copy of it for us, and upon award, you'll be asked to file it and make sure that it's recorded that there is this 50-year requirement. And depending upon the agreement, we may also ask that you have a notice of unrecorded grant agreement as well. We ask for project location maps and shapefiles. These don't have to be extremely detailed. We are specifically looking for where your project is and what the project boundaries are. That is the minimum information that we need from these. We detail what kind of information we'd like you to add to the shape files, just so that we can keep track of whose files are what, and that there's no question as to what we're looking at. And again, those attachments will all be uploaded here. And if you have any questions on how to do this, please save them for the end, or if they come up as you're filling this out, you can feel free to contact us through the help desk, either our phone number or our email. Okay, and so these are just some basic do's and don'ts for using web grants. Please do save your progress often. I think it's just a good practice, no matter what you're doing, to save frequently. And just in case you lose your progress, definitely as we get closer to the deadline, that's when we have higher traffic on the website. So please start your application early. You don't want to be caught up in something where there's a lag or there's an error and you're prevented from submitting on time. So do yourself a favor and definitely start early and save your progress. And When it comes to navigating the system, if you have to back out of a form, please use WebGrants back button instead of the one that's on your browser. We've had issues in the past where people have lost data because of using the browser back button. And just to save you some possible heartache and just avoid that problem altogether, let's just use the WebGrants back button, please. And we have some user instructions on the WebGrants main menu, which will be at the top of the page. And you can, again, always ask for help when it comes to navigating WebGrants or figuring out which button to click, and sometimes it gets a bit frustrating. So we're here for you, and that is our phone number and email address again. So when it comes to writing proposals or this pre-application, you definitely need to read both the PSN and the guidelines. The PSN focuses on specific requirements for this solicitation, and the guidelines talk about the entire process from solicitation, application, and then going through your awards. So information about what's expected of you after a award will be in the guidelines as well. And something that isn't always considered that's in the guidelines is that we require signage for our projects, so that you give the department and CCI, or the California Climate Investments, credit for being partners in your project and funding it. So please, when you're working on your budget, make sure to include that as well. So when you're writing your pre-application, please take into account the final application's criteria. You want to make sure that while you're filling out this pre-application and the requirements for describing your project and giving us details are a lot lighter, it's more summary based, the final application will have the heavier descriptions and requirements and a lot more detail. So if that's going to be a big lift for you, that's something we're going to comment on when we give back your after our reviews. So please consider that. Take a look at those criteria, and again, the post-award requirements in the guidelines. Because then if you're thinking ahead and you're preparing yourself for the final application, you'll be in better standing. I think it'll be a lot easier of a lift for you, and it won't be it'll just be less stressful if you're more aware of what's required up front. So we have all of that, again, in the PSN and in the guidelines. Again, just to remind you, you cannot enter the final application phase without first completing a pre-application and being invited into the final application phase. We detail the requirements and the criteria for being invited in the PSN under the pre-application evaluation section. Please clearly address all our criteria that we outline in the PSN. And when you're discussing your quantification of the GHG benefits and outlining your benefits and co-benefit monitoring, please take into account the CARB quantification methodologies and make sure that you're using the appropriate tools, and that the calculator tool that you're using makes sense for the project that you're presenting us. If you have a large project that you're only asking for a portion of the funding on, you need to clarify what is just the grant portion, or the portion that you're requesting funds for, which will be a grant project, versus what the overall project is. This can get confusing for people when it's unsure whether or not certain tasks have been completed, whether or not engineering has been completed, or if the project is located in one area or another. This also ties into if you have multiple projects or multiple portions of one project that you're applying for. You need to just clarify these things for us so that they're differentiated, and it is just, it makes sense. We ask that when you're asking for grant funds, don't underestimate yourself. Like, please definitely ask for what is necessary to complete your project. We've run into problems where people have reduced the amounts for certain aspects of their projects because they thought they would be more competitive that way. But the case is, if you don't have a more honest evaluation of what the project costs are, it doesn't seem like a feasible project, and you won't score very well later on if that dollar amount doesn't make sense for what you're doing. And we want to have confidence in those that we're awarding, that they can complete their project. Again, please manage your time appropriately. Web grants can be a bit tricky for those who aren't familiar with it. So please manage your time so that you avoid any possible lags if they're, if on the last day or two before the solicitation closes, and in this case, before the pre-application phase closes. And this is more appropriate for later in the process, but if after the entire PSN is closed and you aren't awarded, we do offer post-award debriefings so that you can sit down with us and discuss how your proposal could have been approved. Okay, so that comes to our question and answer section. If you have a question, you can please type it into the Skype chat or the instant messenger, or you can ask for us to unmute you so that you can speak your question. But we'll open it up, and thank you for your attention.
So we have one question from Julika. What kind of documentation would be required to meet the land tenure requirements for projects on U.S. Forest Service land?
Okay, so for land tenure on U.S. Forest Service land, because it is between a federal agency and our department, we would allow a memorandum of understanding or a memorandum of agreement. It would be negotiated between the federal government and the grantee how long the term may be. And if it is lesser than 50 years, then we would ask that in good faith we will renew that agreement every so often. So if it is only an MOU or an MOA for 10 years, then we would have an agreement that it would be renewed every 10 years, 5 times. So for 50 years.
Our next question.
Okay, so for the land tenure requirement, is a letter from the landowner required if the landowner is CDFW? That is a good question. So yes, I think it is appropriate that we have it in writing that that CDFW acknowledges the project and that we are engaging or we are allowing the project to happen on our lands. We currently have projects on our lands, and we will enter into a different kind of agreement than a CE, obviously, but we'll. But it would be good to have it in writing that CDFW is aware, or the CDFW lands manager for that particular area that the project's going to be in is aware and agrees to enter into this project. Okay, so Catherine asks, for the project timeline, if this is a part of a larger project, should we include tasks that were completed prior to June 1st, 2020 that we already have funds for? Oh. Sorry. Example includes permitting, pre-construction surveys, tasks that are funded from other grant sources, not CDFW GHG funds. Actually, that is a fantastic question. Yes, please include milestones that have already been completed and just make it clear that it's completed under other grant sources or other funding sources. Because those steps will be instrumental in completing the project, and we would have no other way of knowing that those phases have been completed. So that would give us the information that we need to appropriately assess your project. So yes, thank you, Catherine. Dustin asks, are these grants available for lands owned by a different non-state land management agency? So I believe, if I understand you correctly, any of our eligible applicants are people who are either a public entity, and that could be state, federal, local, or a JPA, a university, or a nonprofit. Oh yes, federal, yes, a nonprofit or federal agencies, and any recognized tribes. So if they're not state, they could be a nonprofit or a federal or a tribe. Rich asks, I'm interested in Mountain Meadow restoration, but all of our restoration projects require the removal of conifer trees, primarily lodgepole pine, that have encroached on historic wetlands and basically turned them into upland forest. Looking through the greenhouse gas benefit calculator, it appears as though a project that removes trees from dozens, if not hundreds of acres will not meet the criteria for this program. Is that a correct assumption? Okay, so yes, that is what it looks like when it comes to the calculators. However, that would not necessarily preclude your project from being selected. When it comes to calculating greenhouse gas benefits, we do so as a program and rather than project by project. So as long as the entirety of our grant program shows a net reduction, then we're good. But when it comes to your particular project, if it looks like a good project and it ticks all of our boxes, I wouldn't discount yourself. I would still apply. Okay, Dustin has another question. Are the grants available for lands owned by CDFW but managed by a county land management agency? Yes. So, county land management agency, yes, they would be an eligible applicant. You're welcome, everyone. And if we don't have any other questions at this moment, you could always email or call us. And we also have another workshop scheduled for July 31st. So it'll be the same exact information that I just gave everyone right now, but we'll also have a Q&A session. And we are recording this. We'll make it available online, and the questions and answers will be incorporated into our FAQs that we post. So if you aren't already, I would highly recommend signing up to be part of our email list, which is through our website, and we provide links to our website in the PSN, and we'll keep you guys updated to when the next applicant workshop will be and when we update and post our next round of FAQs. Okay, I guess with that, we can call it early. Thank you very much for attending and for your attention and questions. If you have questions, this is our Web Grants Help Desk information on the screen. Okay, Amelia asks, is planning only projects eligible? Unfortunately, no. These grant funds are specific to implementation projects, and so including the hybrid planning and implementation project category is new for us, but it's definitely we have to have a primary component that's implementation. Yes, I'm still here. What's your question, Catherine? Okay, so for the 2 to 3 page pre-application limit, for the conceptual model, would you upload the model as an attachment, and would you describe the model as it relates to the project on the attachment or in the pre-app document? Um, the intent was to have it with the pre-application, and the figure, the model, would be the separate attachment. You're welcome.